You've heard of snakes on a plane, well how about werewolves on a train? Good evening and welcome to Midnight Movie Club and my throwback review of Howl 2015. Howl is a British indie werewolf film directed by Paul Hyatt and written by Mark Huckerberry and Nick Osler. Howl follows Joe, a train guard pulling a double shift where he needs to man the red-eye train leaving London for Hillsborough. The train is full of stereotypical British characters and they are making Joe's shift even worse for him, but the worst is still to come. The train ends up breaking down somewhere in the middle of the fictitious Thornton Forest that is home to a hungry pack of werewolves. As the night goes on, Joe and the passengers find themselves in a fight for survival as they begin to be picked off one by one. The film stars Ed Speleers, Holly Weston, Elliot Cowan, Shauna MacDonald and even has a cameo from the man himself, Sean Pertwee. So straight off the bat, if you are a lover of the werewolf genre like myself, then I really do think you will enjoy this film. It does have its problems, but I think you will appreciate its different approach to the werewolves and some of its subversions of the typical creature feature genre. Howl was Hyatt's second feature film, with most of his previous work being in prosthetics and special effects. He has worked on some great British horror movies like The Descent, The Woman in Black, Attack the Block, and another werewolf film you may have heard of, Dog Soldiers. It comes as no surprise that his effects background came in handy with Howl, as it boasts some awesome, truly awesome practical effects. The werewolves we see in Howl are very different to any other we have seen before. They are a lot less wolf and more human, but that doesn't make them any less scary. I honestly reckon these are some of the creepiest werewolves in film. The way they move and their eyes shine in the darkness is truly the stuff of nightmares. Props to the people inside those suits pulling off those creepy movements. There were a few times where it did seem a little silly and just looked like someone in a suit jumping all over someone else, but the parts where they seemed terrifying outweighed that. I really loved all the guts and gore that were here in this film. It all looked great and they didn't overdo it. They didn't rely on the gore for the tension or the scares. One thing that I found rather inconsistent was the lighting. In some places it was far too dark when it should have been brighter, then it was too bright when it should have been darker. The werewolves were at their creepiest when it was dark and you could just make out the shape of them and the glow of their eyes. Those parts were great, but then in other parts of the film they would shine a body searchlight on them and it would just ruin the mystery and terror. I think if they stuck to keeping them in the dark just a little bit more until the end, it would have made it far creepier. But all in all, the practical effects were awesome and it's just great to see them being used in a film. Even back in 2015, everything was becoming CGI. Now I do have to say there is some shoddy CGI at a couple of points in this film, with a shit looking speeding train and a couple of other things, but thankfully that was the only CG and it wasn't on the screen for too long. Now moving on to performances from the main cast, they are all pretty solid to be honest. Ed Speleers is good as Joe, an everyday working bloke who is easy to root for throughout the film. I enjoyed seeing him grow a backbone on his journey. Holly Weston wasn't winning any Oscars or anything like that, but she was passable as the other railway worker who just wants to get through this night. I thought Elliot Cowan was actually pretty good as well, being the stereotypical business dickhead. It's someone you love to hate. And Shauna MacDonald was fine in her role too, although I would have liked to have seen more from her character. I thought there was more there, and I really do think MacDonald is an awesome actress and she could have just brought so much more if she had more to work with. One of the standouts for me was actually Sam Gittins, who plays Billy. We perceive him at first to be just a chav, but turns out to be pretty sound. He was super likeable and almost just as much as Joe, if not more, so I'd love to see him in more, that's for sure. As far as the story goes, the narrative is pretty light. It's a bunch of people on a train heading somewhere, it stops and werewolves attack them. That's it. Their one goal is survive. On the surface, it is just plain B-movie creature feature schlock that is really fun if you are a horror and a werewolf fan. It definitely has a bit of good old British humour to it as well, which is nice to see. It's not all doom and gloom. There are a couple of laughs to be had, which is always nice in the genre. The writing for the most part was fine, all the characters were believable, the dialogue was decent. A lot of the characters are very annoying as the film starts, but as the film goes on, you begin to warm up to most of them as they grow and we learn more. I think if you read into it a little bit more, the film is about fitting in and finding your place in the world, and that Joe is kind of on a journey of finding where he should be and who he should be with, and in the end there is a resolution to that if you think of that as the narrative. That's the way I read into it anyway. Moving on, and the sound design, to be honest, wasn't too memorable. The howls of the werewolves I feel could have been a little bit better. They just sounded like normal wolves to me, and with them being more humanish hybrid, I would have liked to have heard more pain in their howls, or something a little bit different to fit how they looked. The score, on the other hand, was pretty nice. I liked the mystical tone it had to it, and in places it had these nice chanting, supernatural sounding vocals, but I felt it was just a little bit underused. In the more intense action sequences, it didn't do much for the action that we were seeing. The editing for the most part was fine, but there was a little bit in the second act that I noticed where the editing just looked a little bit choppy. I'm not sure if it's what I was watching it on, but it just didn't seem right. But it was fine, as I say, for the most part. As for the pace of the film, it just kept going. Once the action starts, it doesn't really stop. And when it does slow, there is still tension to be felt by what the characters are doing. There is always a goal, and it is not just like they are sitting around in a train for hours with nothing happening. All in all, Howl is a decent fun time for werewolf fans. It has some awesome practical effects and an interesting take on the creatures, and has some nice bloody action scenes. The film could use a good amount of polish in certain areas to push it to the next level, but for being an indie horror, I feel like it achieved what it was going for. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Howl a 3 out of 5 rating. Let me know what you made of Howl in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this review, then please do give it a like, and if you haven't already, then subscribe to join the club. As always, thank you very much for watching, and good night.